It actually began back in the 1980s for me, and I came across them while I was researching other topics, angels, demons, and Solomonic magic. And I didn't know much about the Jinn. In fact, I didn't realize that they were the entities behind what we know as the genie in the bottle. And the term Jinn got translated as genie when the old ancient Arabian folktales were translated for the European and English-speaking markets back in the 1800s. So I thought that was interesting, but it was clear to me very quickly that there was far more to the Jinn than this genie in the bottle idea, which our culture has always treated in kind of a humorous way. You know, we don't really take them seriously. But the Jinn are a race of entities. They are quite formidable in their intelligence and their supernatural abilities and power. And as I got deeper into my paranormal investigation over the years, it became apparent to me that the characteristics that they have certainly could account for a lot of peculiar cases that investigators run into that defy explanation. And so when I started collaborating with Phil Imbrogno some years ago, and he's very well known in the UFO community, I discovered that he also had a deep interest in the Jinn and had had his own experiences, including some wild ones in the Middle East. And through a series of conversations, we decided that it would be a good idea to publish some information that would be relevant to the Western audience, especially the Western paranormal and ufological audiences, that here's a player that's behind the scenes, underneath the radar, probably has been all along, and we just haven't recognized it.
So you feel these entities may account for some crossover type phenomena as far as intradimensional or extradimensional beings?
Yes, in fact, there's quite a wide range of cases that they might account for. They have the ability to shapeshift. They live for a very long period of time. They're known to be very vengeful and revenge-oriented. And the creation stories and the lore that's told about them, which I believe has basis in fact, describes them as, at least a portion of them, as wanting their homeland back. They were pushed out of this world, this dimension, a long time ago. They pre-existed us. They were pushed out in favor of us. And some of them want the place back, like a lot of people might want their home back if they felt it was taken forcefully away from them. And they have the ability to come into our dimension, but not to stay for very long periods. Things have changed quite a bit since then. And they are capable of interacting with us in various ways. They can cause possession. They can disguise themselves as a lot of different kinds of entities. And we feel that they're pursuing their own agendas under these guises. You know, we think in some cases we're dealing with demons or fairies or ETs or mysterious creatures, and they may be Jinn in disguise. We don't think that the Jinn account for everything. We don't treat them as one-stop shopping for all paranormal events. But we do think that they are a player, and that some of the experiences and cases that are resistant to resolution, that don't seem to fit into this category or that category, might possibly be Jinn.
Now, you had some photos of drawings or wood carvings that had, I believe it was King Solomon talking to the Jinn. Is that represented properly, or am I misunderstanding it?
Yes, that's right, and that's one of the main ways that the Jinn entered Western lore, although they kind of got buried in the magical tradition that way. King Solomon being the son of David and a legendary and historical figure. There's not a whole lot of historical information on him, but he was the second king of Israel. And is in the Bible, in the Old Testament. It's told how he was a great leader, a very wise man, and built the Temple of Jerusalem and even the entire city of Jerusalem. But the Bible doesn't say how he did that. And it's left to a text outside of the canon called the Testament of Solomon, which was written sometime between the 1st and 3rd centuries, that describes how he enslaved the jinn. And in some translations, this is given as demons, because jinn are often mistaken for demons, that he used demons to build the temple, but in fact it was the jinn. And he enslaved them via magic. God granted him great discernment and a magical ring that he used to summon forth the jinn, force them to reveal their names, which gave him power and dominion over them, and then set them to work. And they were enslaved until he died in 922. The magic that was attributed to Solomon became the basis for most of the Western magical texts called grimoires. And the Key of Solomon is the oldest one of these, and it does have some roots going back to ancient times. Most of these other grimoires that became famous were written much later in the 15 to early 1800s, but they're magical texts for summoning up spirits. Sometimes they're called spirits or demons or angels. In the Western translations, they're never called jinn, but they were jinn originally. So the symbols, the signs, the instructions for creating your magical instruments, the conditions under which you should do your invocations, the astrological signs, the fumigations, etc., are contained in these magical texts. So the jinn influenced that tradition, but they got submerged in it because the average person isn't a practitioner of magic, and even a lot of practitioners of magic don't realize that the jinn had a role in the evolution of this. And of course, these texts are syncretic. That is, they're combinations of influences. There was Jewish demonology that went into this. And they in turn were influenced by Babylonian, Egyptian, and Assyrian and other Middle Eastern sources. There were Christian elements that were added into this, and metaphysical elements. So these magical texts have evolved throughout the centuries, but that's where their origins come from.
That's actually interesting. I'm not even familiar with them, and I'm into paranormal. I'm one of those people, I got to confess, I didn't really know anything about them.
Well, they've done such a good job of remaining hidden that you have to hand it to them. Their name means the hidden ones. And even in ancient times, way before they were absorbed into Islam, the jinn were renowned for being aloof, feeling superior to human beings, being able to influence human beings. They were greatly feared, and they still are in many parts of the Middle East today. But entities are not limited by geography. Their primary creation stories and mythologies and folklore may originate in certain parts of the world, but entities have the ability to be everywhere, and we think that's the case with the jinn.
What do they do? I mean, is like poltergeist activity could be a jinn, or I mean, what are they known for doing, or how do they interact with us?
They were blamed, like demons, they were blamed for all the ills that befell humanity. They were, especially in ancient times, especially associated with plague-bearing winds that came out of the desert, bad luck, accidents, financial ruin, illness, poltergeist disturbances, you name it.
So kind of like the black arts of nowadays.
That's actually interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. That is really.
Well, one of the things that people ask, how do we know it's jinn and not just some poltergeist spirit or a demon or something like that? Well, sometimes it is hard to tell right off the bat, and you have to do a process of elimination. Ultimately, jinn will reveal themselves, but of course, if we don't ask the right questions or look in the right directions or make premature assumptions, we won't find that out. The jinn are interested in themselves and their own agendas. When demons interact with us, it's with the idea of soul subversion. We consider demons to be all evil. Actually, in ancient lore, they weren't all evil, and I don't think all demons are, but the satanic demons that we are focused on in Western society are evil and work for Satan in soul subversion. When jinn possess, they possess for their self